Hey everybody, and welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum. I'll be your host for the next little bit as we dive into another great conversation. And this time, we have none other than Derry Prenkert. And some of you may not know Derry, but I'm looking forward to you getting to know Derry over this conversation, because this is the cool thing about Derry. Derry's been at his church for over 21 years in student ministry. And I know that's like really unheard of a lot of times within the student ministry world, because it's just the thing. A lot of youth ministers have only been at their church for 18 months. I think the statistic is rising a little bit. Maybe 2 years is the average stay of a youth minister at a church. And I don't know about you, but that it saddens me to hear that. And I've always loved, hearing about stories that have longevity. And student ministers who can really stick it out and really build those relationships and see what God is doing over the long haul. And that is Derry Prenkert. Derry is the student ministries pastor at Napanee Missionary Church in Napanee, Indiana. And we're going to have a great conversation with him. I'm especially excited for you to hear about what he does as he transitions in his sixth graders. That's a really cool way that he does that, and he's learned it over the years and kind of perfected it, and still perfecting it. And it's going to be great for you to hear what he does with that, and just a humble heart that he brings to student ministry. I mean, he's been doing it for a long time, but he's still ready to learn from others, and just he knows that he could be doing better. And I love that humility that he brings to his ministry. But before we jump into that, we do want to thank our sponsors before all of this, because they are awesome, and we are so grateful that they continue to sponsor this podcast. And so first up is Work Camp NE. If you're looking for a summer mission trip opportunity for your students, check them out. If you're looking for, they do offer some spring break options and some independent trips as well. So I definitely urge you to check out their website, workcampne.com. And our other sponsors is combination sponsorship, as many of you know, between the National Network of Youth Ministries, whose website is youthworkers.net, and the Reach Youth New England organization. Both of those organizations are awesome, and their goal is to connect youth workers together. That's their whole goal. So check out youthworkers.net for the national network, or reachyouthne.com, specifically if you're in the New England area, for Reach Youth New England. And make sure you give them some love. Looking for a service project, mission trip for your students, check out Work Camp NE. If you're looking to connect with other youth workers, make sure you check out the National Network or Reach Youth New England. And we are so grateful for what they do every month to sponsor this podcast. But that's enough about the sponsors. I know sponsors are great, but I know you're particularly excited about this conversation. I know I am. And so without any further delay, let's jump into this conversation that I had with Derry Prenkert. All right, thanks so much for joining us today, Derry.
Hey, it's so good to talk to you, Steve.
Yeah, so it's been cool to get to know you a little bit over the last couple of years with the DYM 100, and reading what you've been doing and hearing you on some other stuff and everything. But maybe there's some people that don't really know who you are yet. They should, and so that's one of the reasons why I had you on today. But jump into your story a little bit. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how did God get you to the point where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting deal, because when you say people should know who I am, I mean, I'm in a pretty unassuming town. Grew up in, and in the town that I actually grew up in. So I'm a Northern Indiana boy, a member of the flyover state that is Indiana, and grew up in a small town called Wakarusa, Indiana. It's kind of in the shadow of South Bend and Notre Dame, but Amish communities all around us. And there's two towns that make up the main high school, Wakarusa and Napanee. Wakarusa 800 people, Napanee 6,000 people, and I grew up in the community. Was that kid that grew up? It's a very religious community. Interesting thing that happens at that high school is when they introduce the homecoming court, every person tells what church they go to. And wow. I thought that was normal until I got to college, and I brought one of my college friends back, and he just looked at me and said, "Did they just say what church that kid goes to?" And I said, "Yeah, that's that's what you do. And he just laughed. He said, no, Derry, that's not what you do.
Yeah.
So that's the town I grew up in. I was the kid in the youth group that knew all the right answers. The way I often explain it in my testimony is I had a ton of religion pumped into me that was good and healthy, but I never connected in a relationship with Jesus during my middle school and high school years. And my high school years got pretty dark. I went off to Christian college because of a youth pastor that just one day he cared about me, was always there for me. He kind of saw through the hypocrisy that was present in my life and just recognized that I was one of those kids that just needs somebody that was going to be there and not judge me, but love me. And he said, Derry, I think you should look at going to this Christian college, Bethel College, and consider going to youth ministry. I think God has a calling on your life. And he would say he knew I hadn't really truly crossed the line of faith yet, but for some reason in that moment, the grace of God, I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And ended up going to this college, and in the beginning of my freshman year, just radically encountered God one lonely night in my dorm room of realizing just how empty things were. And in the week that followed, it became clear, just confirmed calling into youth ministry. I started interning my sophomore year at Napanee Missionary Church, which is one of those two towns of the high school I graduated from. And had a church that just invested in me. And when I graduated from college, I had every intention to get out of this place. I was like, I got to get out of that town. I was, small town boy that wanted to get out, and the job was offered to me to stay at this church, and just became clear that I was supposed to. And so moved from an intern into an intern that really led the middle school ministry to now then being the high school pastor. And 21 years since I started at Napanee Missionary Church, I'm still here. I've carried the role of middle school intern that ran the games, to leading the middle school ministry, to high school pastor who was kind of overseeing middle school and high school, to my current role as student ministries pastor, and maybe even looking at a shift to be calling the next gen pastor at this point. So I've kind of held every role inside student ministry. But the crazy deal is, I really don't know how good I am at this, because I just know I've been at one church, and I could easily, maybe a chimpanzee could have been doing the same things I was doing. I don't know. But the beauty is, the thing I think is cool about it, I always look at that scripture of a prophet's without honor in his own town, and I can't figure out what to do with that for me, because here I am in the town I grew up in. But I do know this: I've walked the exact same halls those kids walked. Maybe I did it in the 90s. But there's some things, we're a religious community, and I get what it's like to be a religious lost kid. And so I can always draw off and find this level of empathy with the kids I'm working with. So that's a bit of the story and the roles I've been in.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I think there really is something. You talk about the scripture, but at the same time, I love the volunteers that are, for instance, in my ministry that did grow up, and they know the same teachers, they know the same schools, they know all that stuff, and they can relate to those students so well. And I'm very grateful for those volunteers within my ministry. It'd be really cool to have that experience where I can relate to a student, because I know exactly what you're talking about when you're saying that.
Yeah. And it's funny because I can do it. I'm kind of the old guy I'm a multi-staff. We're a larger church, but I'm the old guy. I'm kind of like the dad to a lot of kids, but it's so fun in the moments when I can make reference to inside humor inside Northwood High School, and kids are like, wait, they did that back in the 90s too, and immediate rapport. Teachers, I got guys I graduated with that are now teachers that I can relationally work with, volunteers in the ministry. This is the other beauty of being at the same place for a long time, but volunteers in the ministry who I went to high school with, volunteers in the ministry who were students in the ministry. So the relational ties get to run really deep. It's fun to watch that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I know you've done some different stuff and interviews and things about the longevity and student ministry, and that's so huge. Unfortunately, it's more rare, and so just awesome blessings upon you and the fact that you've been there for 21 years and doesn't sound like you're ready to leave anytime soon. No, unless God calls otherwise. There's two things I'm confident of, is that I would love to raise my family in this community if Lord allows, and I'd love to always carry something along the lines of student ministries or next gen pastor until the day I die. Awesome. But I've learned to hold on to all those things loosely, because God's got a lot better plans than I do. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's one of the cool things. I was just talking to someone, a family in our church yesterday, about people that are just called into student ministry. And I feel like there's more and more of us. But it's so cool to just
find other people that are sold out to students and families and want to, that's exactly where God has called us to serve and to be sold out to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I actually just spent some time on a Google chat with several guys kind of in the same boat. I just hit 40 a year ago, but midlife crisis is a real deal, by the way, very real. And in youth ministry, it's like, it feels like late life crisis when you're 40. Kids look at you like you're ancient. But we were all talking. We were all in like the season of, in the teens of years in ministry and kind of wrestling through. The classic trend was you get to a certain point and then you move up, you move to adults, and all of us saying, I don't really want to do that. However, I'm not really sure my most effective role will continue to be as just that guy that's at all the sporting events and doing the late night hangouts, but I'm going to invest in students still. And I think that's what's exciting. I think we're going to see a trend here like in the youth ministry world of some professionals who say this is a lifelong thing, but now I'm going to maybe zero in more on helping figure out how family ministry could really look, or look at strategies of 0 all the way through what I'm calling independent adulthood. That time when you hit college. I just wonder if there's going to be some trends we're going to see that are going to be really benefit the youth ministry world because of more guys and girls that are just saying, yeah, I'm in this for the long haul.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm sure that your ministry has changed over the years and everything, but what's it currently look like? Like what's a typical week in the life of your ministry?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Like, I love conversations like this. I love to take people's ideas and steal from them. So context for us, we are, and this isn't a humble brag, just context. We're a church of 3,000 in a town of 6,000, which is really weird. Wow. And it's a small town, but we draw from a lot of communities. So there's I think we've got 15 different high schools right now that are currently represented in small town ministry. So I live in a world, we're kind of like on the cusp of that mega church, but in a rural community. Our church thinks small town very much. So we still have a Sunday school at our church, Sunday school hour. We call it small church hour, but it's a bunch of Sunday school classes. So our student ministry has to have a 9:30 to 10:30 programming. We do a Wednesday night program. Our middle school runs 6th through 8th grade, and they have a Sunday morning. They meet separately. 6th grade meets in one class, 7th grade in another, 8th grade. It's kind of the master teacher table leader format. And we focus on the head and Bible knowledge during that time. High school meets all together, same idea, but with the master teacher and the table groups. Wednesday nights are separate middle school and high school. We do something kind of unique for our 6th grade. I can pick that apart in a little bit, but for up until like right around Thanksgiving weekend, we keep 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade separate. But the 6th through 8th grade is the middle school ministry. 9th through 12th is high school. Our middle school small groups run inside the night of Wednesday night with the programming. Like if you're there, you will be in a small group. Okay. Where high school, our small groups meet beforehand from 6:15 till 7. And then the programming runs 7 to 8:15, and it's up to the high schooler, freshman through junior. If they want to be in a small group, they can go, but they don't have to. And then our senior small groups actually meet off of Wednesday night on a Sunday night. And just a little side note on that, there's a progression that we've seen that's really cool. 6th grade, when you're a 6th, 7th, 8th grader, optional small groups, they don't even know what a small group looks like. Yeah. And so we're just trying to coach them on, here's what this thing's all about. Then they kind of get this upgrade to where it's like, if you want to be there, you're there. And then by their senior year, we're trying to teach them how do you do small groups, because that's the model that's going to carry on if they're at some big state college or wherever. There's always going to be a way they could find a small group. So that's a very quick flyover of what our format is.
Okay, cool. I'd like to dive into a little more. When and how, I guess, did you make the decision to do small groups beforehand? Because it's not necessarily the norm. I know a couple of different ministries that I know that are trying that. But how did that happen to go before instead of after?
That's a great question. We kind of had to have our hands forced into it. Our whole church does programming on Wednesday night. So there's something from birth till 1 foot in the grave available on Wednesday night. And that programming, they want us to stay as close to 7 to 8 o'clock as possible in that programming, which, student ministries programming 1 hour to accomplish all this different stuff is just near impossible.
Right.
And so we cheat a little bit by having middle school run 6:45 till 8:05.
Okay.
We're good there. But with high school, we came with the idea of, if we made small groups optional, could we run those outside the 7 to 8 model? And our senior staff was like, that's totally cool. We would like to see that run beforehand rather than after. We don't want you to run that from 8 on, because we could be looking at too many late night things and issues. But so we're like, okay, cool, let's try it. And I mean, I actually 21 years ago walked into this setup where it was like that. And so it was a thing we just, because of the setup of this, which some people will say, oh, that's terrible that you have to stay inside of this adult programming. And I say, yeah, it's tough, but you know what's awesome is our middle school attendance greatly is benefited because there's something for their parents during that same time.
Yeah.
You know, they aren't just dropping them off. So yeah, we run it that way. We focus in heavy with our small group leaders from freshman through junior to say, hey, this isn't going to be follow-up discussion. This is going to be, you're going to really zero in on building community. We say our purpose for small groups is communicated again and again, that it's an environment where anyone can find belonging with peers and a caring leader. And so belonging is the big word. We let them know we'd love for you to mentor, disciple kids, but the biggest thing is we want every kid to have a spot where they know, in a time of need, who can I turn to, whether they're my friends and an adult. And we want to set that up really well. And so it creates a little bit of a different purpose than some small groups have, I think, in doing it in the beginning.
Yeah.
But we've found great wins. And here's the thing I think that's interesting in it is a consistent pattern I've learned over the years is when we kick them off, and we run September till May, and then we take the summer off. It's from September through December. It's a lot of games, a lot of leaders going, man, I just can't go deep, and I don't feel like I'm connected. And then something shifts over winter break. In January through May, you start hearing, whoa, we had this incredible night, or I had amazing follow-up with a student who just dropped this kind of little bomb in the middle of our conversation that I was able to follow up on. And so it seems to be the best discipleship in the model we have happens outside of small group time and happens as the year goes on.
That's cool. I also want to, you dived into a little bit how sixth grade doesn't join in right at the beginning. Discuss that a little bit. Like, how does that look as the sixth graders are transitioning into middle school?
Yeah. This is something I love to talk about. And it is a luxury of being multi-staff that we do this, but there's something in it that I just would encourage anybody to consider is our middle school, everybody's middle schools in their community layout different. There's that battle. Do you do a preteen ministry? Do you do a middle school ministry? So we were doing a 5th and 6th grade ministry because the primary high school, middle school community that we were reaching out to had grade school up till 6th grade. And so we were doing a 5th and 6th grade, but then they shifted and they moved into their buildings 6th grade through 8th grade. But when we started looking at what they were doing, they actually 6th grade is over in their own wing completely for the whole year. And there's the teachers kind of share the class load, but it's all the same teachers teaching the 6th grade. And then 7th grade and 8th grade is over doing their own thing. And right about that same time, we were talking with John McAllen, who's a youth pastor of Southeast Christian down in Louisville, and he told us about something they were doing where they were running. It was all falling under the cloud of middle school ministry, but 6th grade would take a semester and meet separate from the 7th and 8th grade. And they just used it as a time to help build class identity and help them get acclimated to student ministry world over kids ministry world. We said, man, that's what we need to do. So what we do is in April, our middle school staff, some key middle schoolers, head up to our 4th and 5th grade room, introduce themselves, start talking about how we can't wait to get them involved. And then they make the move in June. They become 6th graders. And we don't really do heavy summer Wednesday night programming. So all through the summer on Sunday mornings, they meet as their own class. And our interns will take a little heavier role with 7th and 8th grade. And our middle school staff will really zero in on just getting to know the 6th graders. And then when our fall hits and we really kick off, the 6th grade meets separate from the 7th and 8th grade for the first 12 weeks about. And the first 8 of those weeks, we run the same series every year. It's just called Merge.
Okay.
And it's basically, the picture is we're going to merge you into student ministries, and we're going to merge you into the life of middle school and high school. And I want to talk to you about it, some things that are big deals. And, in those themes, this is the season where, all kinds of changes are happening, and a lot of it's independence. And we take a lot of time to talk about, this has been a faith probably up to this point that you've carried because your mom and dad have told you need to. Your friendships have been determined a lot by your parents, and now you're going to start to get some chances to make your own decisions. And this is a huge point for you to figure out, as you merge into this thing, what's going to be a big deal. So we talk about kind of the whole adolescence transition, as well as what are the big deals inside of our ministry. And we talk about things like worship and what it looks like. We talk about Wednesday nights versus Sunday mornings and what we're trying to accomplish. We talk about small groups, and we really coach them through, this is what a small group looks like. And for the first 8 weeks of that kind of 12 weeks, it's totally just 6th grade based stuff. We run a big outreach in October, because that's one thing we talk about, being a bringing culture, solely 6th grade event. The beauty is we can do the exact same event every year, and it's cool to them. So it's just this giant, we call it under the lights, and we go in our backyard, we rent these giant floodlights and do a bunch of games. And this last year we had like 35% first time visitors show up to it.
Nice.
So it's kind of it's got a school feel. And then what we do is from like late October to November, whatever timing it is for a series, 7th and 8th grade. Oh, and all during this time, 7th and 8th grade is doing their own gig. Like they would always, like middle school will always look for 7th and 8th grade. All the other times they're doing their own gig. But then right around the end of October into November, we run a series that will be the same with 6th grade as it is with 7th and 8th grade. And this past year, it was a relationship series, and it was on dating relationships. We actually read all the way through high school. But what we did was, on 1 week, the 6th grade actually went over to the 7th and 8th grade room, and they just joined in on the worship time together.
Okay.
The second week of that series, the 6th grade jumped over and joined in on a special game that we did. And we're prepping the 7th and 8th grade, saying, hey, 6th grade's going to be coming over soon. Be ready. We're going to make them feel welcome. Remember what it was like for you when you made that move? Man, remember how awesome it was when the people that reached out to you. Remember how much it stunk when they didn't reach out to you? Well, don't be that. Let's be the group. And so they're kind of acclimating to it. Then the next week, we bring them over for just the message. And then Thanksgiving week, we break. We don't actually meet on that Wednesday night. And the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, we bring parents in to the night with 6th grade. We kind of do a special moment where they start over in their room when the programming starts at 6:45. We say, hey, we just finished up this merge series. We celebrate. We do refreshments. We set up some displays to show what this is all about. And then we say, but tonight's the night. You're going to join in with 7th and 8th grade for the rest of the year with middle school. And what we do, and the whole church is bought on this. Like I said, we had adult all the way through. So it's really, it's like, I love the moment. It's the rooms are on two opposite ends of the building.
Okay.
And so this giant tunnel is formed that includes the parents of the 6th graders, every high school student, every 7th and 8th grade student. And a lot of time adult classes come out, and there's an area that's like a balcony above this open area, and they all kind of line around the top. And we do a tunnel march that turns into a run of the 6th graders over. And if you can just picture people cheering and going nuts.
That's got to be incredible for them.
Oh, yeah. It's just, and you have 6th graders that are like, I'm terrified. I don't want to do this. but they love it. Yeah. And it's just this celebration moment of like, we are so excited to have you be a part of this. Spoiler here, and I'm afraid, if this gets released, I don't know when you're going to put this out, but this year we're working, and we might have a drum corps that's going to come in. And they're either going to lead the march, or in that open room, they're going to be like, a drum troop's going to be like playing while they go.
That's awesome.
So, but the big principle we've learned has been, we create this incredible class identity as we do that. We ease so many parents' nerves through this. I mean, that jump out of Kidman into student ministries, it's a huge jump in a parent's mind, and they're terrified. And that jump into middle school that's just so scary because that parents know it. That's the first step into the point from where my world revolves around what my parents say to, I get to start questioning them. And there's just something cool that happens in the parents when they realize, hey, we get that this is a huge transition, and rather than just making it happen really quick, we're going to move it slow. We're going to focus in on your kids. I've had parents who this is their, especially that one that's the first kid that jumps in. where they just said, thank you, thank you for this, because I feel like you're giving me time to get acclimated to it. So there's a few things I recognize in this. We're a larger ministry that has multiple staff that allows us the luxury to do this. But I'd say if somebody has just a great volunteer, and it doesn't have to be the same timeline, but what could it look like in that transition, to find ways to really give some space to acclimate not only kids but the parents toward this change that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's huge. I remember just at DYM 100 this year, and Katie Edwards was talking about just how they ease their sixth graders in, or their seventh graders in and stuff as well. And that was the first time I'd really even thought about doing something along those lines to kind of ease them in, not only for the benefit of the students, but also the benefit of those parents, especially, like you said, the first time ones, that this is a brand new world for them, and they're probably overwhelmed and all these things going through their head, and if the church can come alongside them and help them and ease their mind and say, hey, we're here to do this together with you. That's awesome. So,
really cool. And one note to make on this that I didn't say in it, that like 2 weeks in, when we start in the fall with this whole thing with sixth grade, we run a parent meeting that we run. So we start our programming at 6:45. We run a parent meeting at 6:15 one night that just is for all sixth grade parents to come in. And we hand every sixth grader a Bible that night as a gift. So what they do is from 6:15 till 6:45, they're meeting with me, as well as my middle school staff comes in and introduces themselves. And then they go over and take part in kind of the Bible ceremony, they meet their kid's small group leader that night. And I'm sure you've dealt with this, and others out there have dealt with it. Parent meetings are the dumbest thing in the world, right? Yeah. Because you hold them and you get like 5 that show up that don't need to be there, and some deacon that's trying to spy on you,
right?
And then 3 people that showed up in the wrong room, and the ones that you really want there aren't there. But this one we get great attendance at, because it's the most freaky time for a parent. It's also really the first time to really get acclimated to what's going on. And so we found that to be, I use that as a chance, the 30 minutes I get them, I use that as a chance to kind of lay down some principles with the parents to say, look, we are here to partner with you, and here's what that partnership looks like. Here's what we believe we're uniquely better at than anything else that your kid's involved in, and we only care about one thing, and that's your kid's relationship with Christ. You got sporting events that are awesome, and we love to see your kids get involved with sports. That coach may be a believer, but guess what else? You got to focus on wins and losses and other things. We don't have focusing on that. So that's why I want to encourage you to dive into this. And here's how you can contact us in times where you have needs or questions or whatever else, and just try to hit principles on that. And it's proved to be a huge win for us since we started doing that.
That's awesome. That's so great, man. Derry, I could keep talking to you and asking you questions about your ministry, but I want to move on a little bit. Maybe at some point we're going to have back on for a second part or something. But
sure.
But you've been in ministry for 21 years, same church. I am sure there are a lot of things you've learned over the years, and so let's take it back in time. Like, if you could jump in a time machine and say, go back 21 years and tell Derry of young ministry time, you're like, man, you should really do this instead, because this would really benefit you for the long haul. What's a few tips that you've picked up along the way that you'd like to share with others?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love this question. I've listened to your podcast. I've heard this question, and every time I think about it, it's one of the more painful questions to think of, because to go back and talk to young me, man, I was just the level of confidence that I thought I had it all figured out. Every year I'm realizing how much less I know as I get to know more. And so, to go back to young me, I think one of the biggest things I would hear, and I actually heard Bill Hybels say this last fall at the Leadership Summit, and it just put to words something that I've really been coming more and more to grips with over the last couple of years, is with enough humility, young Derry, you can learn from anybody. With enough humility, you can learn from anybody. And I'll use DYM 100 as a great example of that. I've gone to UF because we met there at this conference with a bunch of other youth pastors. I've gone to all these conferences, and being at a church for a while, I start to think I got some things figured out. And even going in, sometimes I meet guys or meet others, and I'll just be like, oh yeah, here's this person that just I make these judgments on all these others of why I shouldn't listen to them and everything else. But it's amazing when I can walk in and just simply say, like, there's something I could pull from this person. This person has something to offer to me. What is it? What could it be? And I would say I've learned more about what youth ministry really can look like and been able to contextualize things better in the last 3-4 years as I took a real attitude adjustment on that. And one of my more meaningful, practical ideas that came out of this year's DYM 100s through a conversation with a guy that was 1 year in, just talking through some things that he sees going on in youth culture, and then actually leaning to say, hey, you're not that far removed from youth group. What's going on? And so that would probably be one of the biggest principles I would give.
Cool.
The second thing I'd want to tell myself is, hey, trust your senior leadership. Trust your senior leadership. Be their biggest advocate. I've had the opportunity now, 21 years, you start to gain a lot. I've been able to gain a lot more voice and insight and leadership clout. And part of why I feel called to stay in the student ministries for life is I have no desire to carry the load that my senior pastor has to carry. Yeah. I mean, I just look at that and I get sick to my stomach. Because it is, we talk about how youth ministry is thankless, and we talk about how we often get overlooked. And the load the burden that I have to carry is nothing compared to what my senior pastor carries. He gets the calls of everybody. Yeah. He has to figure out how to shuffle things. He's got more demands on his time. And there's times that my senior leadership will make calls that I am so angry about and I don't get. But I know that there is no way I'd want to be in their shoes. And often when I've been able to, again, with enough humility and graciousness, to start my conversations not off with, I'm so ticked at you because, but instead to start my conversation with them to say, hey, can you help me understand this one? Like, here's the call I feel like is being made, or here's where I feel like maybe things are being overlooked, but I might not be understanding this totally. And I've seen so many guys burn out in their places because they just didn't give enough grace to their senior leaders to recognize, like, they got their own lives. It's tough. So I did that early on. I think I made some harsh judgments on those ahead of me, and I missed out on growing in it. So there's a couple quick thoughts.
That's awesome. That's so great. I've noticed that's something, as you're in student ministry a long time, different things start pointing themselves out, I think, especially, and they start rubbing you the wrong way because you're like, and there almost is this feeling of arrogance that tends to creep in sometimes. You're like, I know what to do. I know how to do this, when really we don't. But we do need to trust the senior leadership. But I love what you said too about, not only trusting them, but asking questions about it. Can you help explain this a little more? Because I don't fully understand it. And here's what I see. Can you help fill in the gaps there? Because instead of you just going at them with attack, it's going at them with trying to understand. And that's so huge.
For sure, man. It's huge. And honestly, student ministries, we're the cutting edge. We're doing things that are innovative. There's no question about it. But we're not that awesome,
right?
We got there's a side of saying, yeah, we're doing things that the church needs to be doing. We tend to be the ones that lead the charge. It's always funny when an adult program comes and says, it'd be really cool is to do this small group ministry. Yeah. What if we did this revolutionary thing? Like, yeah, we did that back in the 90s. Yeah. But yeah, there's something to be learned through humility and grace.
Yeah, for sure. Man, Derry, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm sure that the people are going to want to hear more from you and get in touch with you. What's the best place for them to do, or the best method to get in touch with you and maybe hear more from you and pick your brain a little more? Yeah, sure. I'm on Facebook. I'm probably most active on Facebook. The DYM community is a spot that I hang out, but you can friend me on Facebook. I have Twitter and Instagram. It's just my name. Fortunately, having the name I have, it's really easy to get that handle. It's at Derry Prenkert. It's DerryPrenkert. I also am an author on DYM, and I got a lot of stuff that's available on there that you can check out. And definitely don't hesitate to anybody that wants to just talk. I love just talking and learning and sharing any insights. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much once again, and man, blessings upon your ministry there. Hey, thank you. Thanks, Steve, for what you're doing. Appreciate you. All right. Well, didn't I say you were going to enjoy this podcast? I thought you were. And I know you probably already got some notes taken down and you're thinking already maybe how you can involve the sixth graders in your ministry or the fifth graders or however you do it. Maybe you're already thinking about how you can transition ninth grade when that happens into high school or even afterwards. I hope this conversation with Derry has sparked some ideas in your ministry, but also I hope he's actually challenged you to be a little more humble. He has me. Talking with him, I was just reminded again about how important it is to show humility. I mean, that was Jesus, right? He was humble, and that's how he led. So we need to do that as well. And that is Derry Prenkert. So we thank you so much again, Derry, for joining us, and thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. And if you like what you've heard, I encourage you to share it with others. That's one of the best ways for this podcast to get around for other people to find out about it is if you share it. So that'd be awesome if you just share it out there with other people that would enjoy it. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe on one of your podcatchers out there like iTunes or Podbean or Stitcher or TuneIn Radio. There's so many out there, Google Play. Make sure you subscribe so you can always get the newest episode right into your inbox or however you subscribe. That'd be awesome. And before we close out, I do want to thank our sponsors one more time. WorkCamp NE, check out their website for service-based mission trips for your youth group, WorkCampne.com. Be fantastic for your youth group. I know it. I've been there many, many times. Definitely check them out. And also, if you're not connected with other youth workers in your area, if you're in New England, check out reachyouthne.com. And if you are just in general in the United States, National Network of Youth Ministries at youthworkers.net. Be amazing just to connect with other youth workers and partner together and encourage one another and hold each other accountable. And it's great too to have other youth workers that you can just talk about stuff, because let's be honest, there's things that go on within your culture, your church and everything that you just can't talk to other people in your church, but it's great to talk to other youth workers who know what's going on, and you can kind of just share in that together. So make sure you check out their website. Now, before we wrap up today, I do want to tell you about one more thing that I've added to the podcast website recently, and that's a patron option. Now, I know patron stuff is really big, especially on YouTubers and all these other things. And what I really thought about this, I thought long and hard about it, because we have sponsors and they take care of the regular stuff for this podcast, being able to do it and everything. But I know some of you might want to give a little bit, and you can give $1 a month or more. That's fine. But here's what happens. So I have goals on there that I would love to be able to get even better hosting for the site. I would love to be able to eventually maybe bring on an editor for the podcast and make that even better, make this sound even better, and make the production value even better. And I'd love to maybe even bring on another person on the staff to be able to do that. And I think over time, I'd be able to do more episodes than just once a month. So if you like what you've been hearing, you enjoy it, and you want to contribute a little bit, just head over to the studentministrypodcast.com and you can click the little, become a patron button, and it kind of walks you through all the goals and everything like that. And any little bit that you have that you want to contribute will be amazing. Please know that it is definitely not required at all. This podcast, I don't believe will ever go to a paid only sort of model, but I just want to offer you guys the opportunity, and maybe you can make the podcast better over time. And with that, we come to the end of episode 23 of the Student Ministry Podcast. Thank you once again for making this all possible, for checking it out, and for doing all that you do for students and families out there. May God bless your ministry.